She is an artist with a breathtaking vision and a global audience. Also a dedicated teacher, she has inspired and mentored many, while her mixed media art continues to push boundaries, entertain and inform, not only in Sri Lanka but across the world. ETV Power Women proudly presents Anoma Wijewardene. Hi, and welcome to a brand new episode of Season 2 of Power Women. Today we're very fortunate to have with us a renowned artist, Anoma Wijewardene. Hi Anoma, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming, because I want to just start off by asking you, did you always know that you wanted to be an artist? Was it something that you always knew, or did you accidentally kind of stumble across this talent that you have?
I just wanted to paint from day one.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to be an artist.
Yeah.
But also I'm not that very good at anything else.
Okay.
I think that was what I was always doing as a child.
Yeah.
And giving everyone little paintings and painting on the walls, etc. But recently my mother told a friend of mine, she never told me, that even as a baby I would trace the, you know, the embroidery on babies' pillows?
Yeah.
My little finger would go around tracing that. So maybe I was always drawing, you know.
Yeah, you always had this.
Yeah, that's what I really wanted to be. I did study design because my parents said, you can't earn a living as an artist. That's not a profession.
Right.
So then I went to learn designing, because that was a more kind of an applied art as opposed to. But I always had this thing that one day, once I'd done the designing, and once I'd had some, you know, financial security by doing that, I would paint, and paint full time.
I know in your more recent sort of work, you've kind of explored these themes of fear and isolation, and sort of where has that come from? I mean, is it something that you've
well, I suppose in a way, I'm very interested in sort of existential anxieties, perhaps because as a painter one is alone and has to work alone anyway, so one kind of comes to face with things, and I've also had things in my life which has made me look at these issues. Yeah. And probably that's why. But also I think there's other work that I've done which is exploring, the exhibition I did in Sydney was called Space, and it was exploring man's position on Earth, if you like, in terms of nature and the interaction with nature. So it's also things that I'm really passionate about. I have to, my paintings I think are very emotional. Yeah. It's something I'm sort of struggling with myself. I'm not really painting for anyone else. Yeah. I'm actually, it's an adventure and an exploration for me. I'm trying to figure something out for myself about an idea. Yeah. And maybe I don't find a conclusion, but it's my visual exploration of what's going on and worrying me in my mind, or interesting me, you know.
Which kind of leads me on to what I wanted to ask you next, and something that we talked about earlier was the process of creation. You know, as you said, you know, during when we were chatting sort of off camera, you know, you told me that it really is an absolute process. It's not something you just wake up and say, okay, fine, I'm just going to paint.
No, even with any painting, or indeed with a series of paintings, there's a gestation, germination, time, almost like having a baby. I assume I haven't had a baby, but you know,
it is like giving birth,
it is like giving birth. So there's a long time where it's inside, you know, and nothing happening. And having read about books on creativity, etc., I've heard people say it's a little bit like fishing as well. You know, that you're just sitting there waiting for the bite. So sometimes you're in that process. But it's just something that you need to draw out, or it's pushed out by something you feel impassioned by. And then the process moves on to paper and sketches, and I use the camera a lot. I take a lot of photographs. So a lot of it is just going on in my head long before it even gets to sketchbooks. And then sketchbooks, notes. I do a lot of writing. And I'm very interested in poetry and music, and all that comes together in a very kind of, I don't know, hard to kind of even define kind of way to begin a painting. But also I like change, and I like, don't want to repeat myself. I'm excited. I want to explore this. So it has to be through this process that I can't leap into a painting unless it's something I've kind of done before. So it needs to be researched. It is actually a long, sometimes very arduous, tortured process as well. And there are moments of agony.
Yeah.
I mean, there are terrible moments of agony. It's almost purgatory when you can't think of an idea at all and you don't feel like painting, but that's what you're longing to do, but nothing, you're blocked. And that is the worst thing. But then, of course, the final purpose of doing it and why we do it is because it's completely intoxicating. I mean, you know, it's the best high I know, you know. And that's the reward. I mean, the reward of art is neither fame or success, somebody wrote. It is intoxication.
Because you're really putting yourself out there, your heart and soul
and
out there for everyone to see.
Exhibitions are so horrible. It's like standing there naked.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's just your complete self is out there for everyone to, which I think is incredibly brave. I think artists are incredibly brave and incredibly evolved to be able to do that.
I don't know. I think we're just compulsive. That's what makes us feel good. And we need to do it because that's the best thing we can, you know, do. I'd rather be painting than doing anything else. But there are times that, you know, I don't feel like it, or I can't, or whatever. And those are the terrible sort of times where you sort of get sort of stuck. You know?
Right. Well, on that note, we're just going to head in for a little break. But for all of you at home, don't go anywhere because we're going to be right back with a lot more fascinating stuff from Anoma. So we'll see you after this break. Hi and welcome back to ETV Power Women. We have with us Anoma Wijewardene. Anoma, I'm going to ask you actually about your life at Central St. Martin's. I mean, it's one of the most prestigious schools for art and design in the world. And it must have just been an incredible experience. You would have met some fascinating people.
I must say, I never thought I'd get in. It was my dream.
Really?
Yes. It was even very long ago. It was difficult. And I suppose that experience changed me and my life completely. Because being in the middle of London in a college like that really stretched you. And you met people who are all living on this sort of high edge of creativity, all slightly mad. And that was a great relief because, you know, you thought, oh, well, I'm not the only one, you know, and pushing the boat out and breaking boundaries the whole time. I mean, it was very much about not towing the line, but just breaking through into new things and new ideas. So it was both challenging and exciting, but also we worked extremely hard. In my final year, I think I went in early morning when the cleaners went in. And left with the cleaners late at night at 10, sort of 6 in the morning, 10 at night, you know, in the winter. But we played hard as well.
I'm sure.
It was a great sort of atmosphere of creativity and wildness and friendship.
You've kind of embraced technology. And, you know, in your work, you know, you have video installations and, you know, you've kind of embraced all this new media, I suppose, if you like.
I mean, my first love is always using my hands in a very tactile way and using paint. But I'm also fascinated, I always have been by photography. And not per se, but to use as sort of an aid memoir for my work. But what actually set that off was actually seeing Jaffna in 2000 and just after the ceasefire, 2002, and recording it again in terms of actually wanting to do paintings. But then the images were so strong, I really wanted to use them. But I'm not a photographer, I'm not a straight photographer, and I always want to fiddle with, you know, even if I leave a painting for a long time, you know, sometimes it has to be framed because otherwise I will go and change it again. You know, I actually do that sometimes, take it off the frame, you know, and fiddle with it. So really, I liked working with. So it started with digital, you know, fiddling around with Photoshop. I think whatever works, you know, so if it happens to be that sort of medium, that's fine. If it happens to be sand, we'll work with sand. So whatever works to express the ideas that I want to express at that time is what I would look at.
Tell us about the first time you exhibited. Because, I mean, you have exhibited all across the world. I mean, you've had many exhibitions. What was the first one like? I mean,
do you know, I can't remember.
Okay.
Such a long time ago, I think. But what's interesting is that when one's exhibiting in different countries and with different people, with a different audience, not that one's ever working for the audience, you have to be very flexible and adaptable to how your gallerist wants to put the show together, and it just varies. In the Maldives, I did a show which was, ground was sand. Okay. I was in a kind of wonderful marquee, and so it was hanging. It was quite something. Yeah. In Sydney, we worked in a different way. There's a different balance, and she actually said, "Well, I'm hanging the paintings. Do you mind going away?" So it had nothing to do with it, because she said, "I can't think while you're sort of panicking here quietly."
So just, when you see people buying your art, I mean, is that quite sort of, I mean, it must be very thrilling, but also it must be quite difficult to, because these, like you say, they're your babies almost, to actually part with
since
them.
I don't have any babies and children, they are really my babies, and I love them to go to a good home, and especially a home that I know, because then I can go visit them. But also, though, as I said, I paint for myself, when someone chooses a painting, it's because they've had a relationship with it. It's because they've fallen for it. I mean, some people do buy for investment, and other people do buy for decoration, but mostly I think they speak the paintings. So it's as if they have come close to me, and that we get closer because they've understood something that I'm trying to say in the work.
Right, well, on that note, we're going to go into another little break, but we will be back with more from Anoma on ETV, your lifestyle channel. So we'll see you after the break. Hi, and welcome back to ETV Power Women. Anoma, we've talked about your professional life as an artist. I'd like to maybe sort of ask you a bit about your sort of family life. What were you like as a child? I mean, were you quite sort of
bit wild, a bit impossible.
You had sort of
a bit tempestuous and temperamental, and maybe probably quite a problem for my parents.
Oh, really? A bit of a handful, were you?
Bit, and my sister is very gentle and sweet, and is perfect, really. So that made me even look even worse. So I think I might have been a bit of a trial. It's just that I don't really like being told what to do and being disciplined by anybody else, because I've always got my own ideas, and that's not so good if you're small. And then sometimes I'd just disappear and go and climb on the roof and sit there so that nobody could get to me.
It was just like. Were there? I mean, did you come from a background of artists? Were there other members in your family that also took towards art?
My father paints. I mean, he was a sort of engineer, but he used to paint very, very good portraits as well, and he quite liked Cézanne's sort of work.
Right,
so his landscapes were like that. So I got used to him painting when I was very young. I saw that happening. Harold Pyrrhus is an uncle, or great, not an uncle, but a great uncle, or some relative of my mother's. So maybe that's the only other one I can sort of think of as an influence. My aunt took photographs, my mother's sister, so maybe that also kind of influenced. And then I think I also had some wonderful teachers here, especially Nalin Jayasuriya, who actually said to my parents she should study design. And I was at an age when I didn't even know what design was. What is that, And so that's how it started.
I mean, you yourself teach now as well. I mean, is that sort of, I mean, that must be incredibly rewarding. And sort of,
yes, it is. It's actually, I started teaching when I first moved out of London to Somerset when I got married, and I thought, I'm going to be cut off from London. And though I was in London all the time, but still. And so I thought I ought to work in an art college, and and that was a wonderful experience. And then I've always carried on teaching in some form since then, because I love that interaction. Because again, it's a very lonely job that I do. It needs to be. And then the interaction with other people who are creative, who are thinking creatively, and to share ideas and arguments about art is wonderful.
Is wonderful. And also, I mean, just kind of to see sort of this new talent and this emerging talent, and like you said, it just gives you different
and there's so much happening in Sri Lanka. We're hugely brilliant at visual stuff. I mean, whatever level it's at, it's a lot. There's a lot happening. even if it's just down the park, you know,
Yeah.
it's exciting.
It is exciting.
It's exciting.
I wanted to ask you, actually, what was it like having lived in the UK for so long and then moving back to Sri Lanka? I mean, how did that impact your work?
Well, it was very difficult for me because it was also an emotional time. I moved back because my marriage was breaking up,
Right.
and so it was a very tough time to come back, and quite a tough age, in fact, to come back, because I'd actually left Sri Lanka when I was 16 to go to school in India and then to art college. So really, I hadn't lived an adult life here. So it was a bit painful, bit different. So in terms of my work, when I was in England, I was doing a lot of designing.
Right.
And one of the reasons why I decided that I wanted to paint here, well, coming back was also because I could paint here.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be able to design on the level that I was designing there, because in a way you need to be in London, Paris or New York to
have that.
and the work was going to those places. And it wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
You know, my agent who does those places wouldn't have been able to take my work because I was too out of touch with just what's happening. You know, you're working like 2 years ahead of the season.
Yeah.
So it did change my work in that then I started to actually concentrate wholly on my painting.
Yeah.
And it's been wonderful.
Yeah. Well, on that sort of high note, we're going to take another break. But when we come back, we've spoken to some of your friends and family, and they've given us a bit of an insight into you. I'm sure, you know, lovely words, nothing to worry about. So for all of you at home, don't go anywhere. We're going to be right back with the confession cam after this short break. We'll see you soon. Hi, and welcome back to ETV Power Women. We're just coming into our confession cam, which is where we sort of taped some of your friends and family, and they've kind of told us a few things about you, and I'm sure it's all good. Maybe a couple of things you don't want to hear or you don't want us to know. No, I'm kidding. It's all lovely. So why don't we take a quick look at that now? It's just on the screen over there.
To me, like, I consider her one of those brilliant people. And for example, I listen to every word that comes out of her mouth quite intently because she's one of those people who are a perfectionist when it comes to her work. But also she's, to me, one of those very unique people in Sri Lanka, obviously, who is very deep. She always reflects on things before she says something, takes her work very seriously. That's reflected in her art very much, and it's such an individual expression. Obviously, like I said, as a friend, obviously she always has time for you. Anoma, so even though she's not a social person, like Anoma doesn't love to go out all the time to each or every cocktail, but if you're a really close friend of her and she wants to spend time with you, she has time for you. But I mean, with all of that, she's an absolute professional. And I remember this one particular time when I was going for her art classes, I was a few minutes late and we were going on this trip, and she just left me and took off with the rest of the group.
I've been thinking about how I would describe Anoma, and I think probably the best is to tell you how I met her. We were both living in London at the time, and I met her at a cocktail party, and we were talking, and she mentioned something about a tribe called the Senai, who do some very interesting work with dreams. And it was a topic that interested me very much in terms of my professional work. So I said, oh, be a darling and give me the reference. This was before you could just put a name on and Google it. In those days, references were gold dust. It would save you hours of trying to find things. And she said, certainly, and then I heard nothing about it. So I kind of dismissed this as usual socialite kind of stuff where, you know, people say yes, 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 and nothing happens. And then to my amazement, 6 months later, I get a photocopy of the article that gives me all the references with a note to say, sorry it took so long, but I got tied up with some emergency problems. And I think that really says everything about Anoma. It's something to do with a certain quality as a human being. And to find somebody of her generation where you still have that old school respect for other people is very nice. And I think that's the basis of our friendship. I see her work having a narrative quality. And no matter what the clouds are, at the core, there is a sense of access to a higher level. And that higher level is through beauty. you can depend on Anoma. That's not easy to find nowadays. So many friendships are based on what that person can get from you. I've actually discussed this with Anoma, that I don't think there's anything she can get from me and I can get from her. And yet there's a strong bond between us. She's like a sister of mine.
Well, as a child, my mother and all of us saw that she was very talented. And my mother always encouraged her, whether it was any kind of art, cultural thing, art, music, and always encouraged her. And in fact, she says that my mother was the abiding influence in her life. And that was one thing. Then I remember her when she was young, putting this music and dancing, all those, jumping on these chairs and all that kind of thing. As a child, I can say, she had a lot of spirit, and I was able to teach her to ride my horses, also to drive a car. I taught her things like that. Her exhibition quest, which we had about three years ago, I think, that was a magnificent thing, because there she used her art to bring healing and reconciliation with art, music and words, quotations, because this creative minority is the only thing that can change the future and the future of the whole world.
On that beautiful sentiment, we're going to go in for another break, and when we come back we have got the dreaded 10. I'm going to subject you to those 10 questions, but a lot more to look forward to after this short break, so we'll see you soon. Hi, and welcome back to ETV Power Women. We're at that sort of, final bit of the show, the dreaded 10, and poor Anoma looks like really nervous, but I promise you they're not that bad, and I know you'll do brilliantly. So, shall we start? Yeah? Okay. Question number 1. Who's your worst enemy?
I don't see anyone as an enemy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. What would you say to your ex if you met him on the street today? Is there anything you'd like to say to him?
No.
No. Okay.
I think I'd just like to pass him by, actually.
Great. Who, in your opinion, is the greatest artist who ever lived?
That's a very difficult one. Maybe there are a couple of artists that have really informed my work, and one is Turner.
Okay.
And another is someone called Bill Viola, who's a video artist.
Okay.
And so those, but that, I don't think that is the greatest anything.
Would you open your home to a stranger?
I have,
You
many
have?
times.
What's the most outrageous thing that you've ever done?
Oh my gosh, I can't. We have to pass on that, or we have to rethink that. So many.
Do you think you'd ever get married again? Would you like to be married again?
No, I think once was quite enough. I don't think it actually works for me anyway.
Okay.
I'm alone now.
If your house is on fire, what would you take with you first?
Definitely my sketchbooks, because that's where all my ideas and my plans and my thoughts and my personal life is.
If a film was made of your life, who would you like to play you?
No. Who? Me at what age? I mean, that's very difficult.
Yeah. Are you moody in the way artists are sort of perceived to be? Really, you are?
Terrible, and it's terrible to live with, because sometimes I feel ecstatic and I'm as high as a kite and I'm full of beans, and then sometimes I feel so miserable and low.
How do you respond to negative criticism?
Yes, negative, very, very vital. What I don't like is the sort of nasty little bitchy side kind of shot
which
remark,
is not constructive
which
in
is
any way,
not,
it's just
which is not
nasty.
even which is sort of nasty, not really useful.
And unfortunately, we've come to the end of the show. But Anoma, thank you so much for coming. And for all of you watching at home, have a wonderful Christmas and a New Year. We'll be back again next week with a new guest. But if you want to learn more about the show and you'd like to see past episodes and just get some general behind-the-scenes info, log on to www.etv.lk. We've got a Power Women section there. And you can also check us out on our Facebook page, so make sure you log on to that and send us messages. And thank you again for watching, and we'll be back with another brand new episode of Season 2 next week, so we'll see you then.